Hi, my name is Gary, and in this video series, I'm going to show you how to make 2D games using LibGdx. And as part of that effort, I'm going to show you how to incorporate a 2D game framework to make the development process better. And as you know, LibGdx is a cross-platform game development framework, and there are many games available now that are made with it, and you can go through the showcase to view those. And let's go ahead and get started. There's a lot of documentation out here for you to use to set up your project. And so I'll kind of give you the highlights. You can read this if you want more information. So setting up a project, you need to get a integrated development environment, some type of IDE. So if you've chose this already, I assume that you've already have an IDE set up on your system. And if you want to create Android games, you'll need to install Android Studio, and that will help in that development. There are a lot of options there for which IDEs that you can use. Now they have a new LibGdx project setup tool, so you'll need to download that. And that'll take you to this page, which has the download assets that you can download. And so there's several zip files for each environment. So you pick the one that goes with your environment. I've downloaded the Windows version here. And inside here, there's a folder with all the libraries that you need. If you have Java installed, most likely you do, which is why you're here. You just need to copy this jar file over to your project folder where you're going to work. So I have it set here. And so you can just double click that if you have that set up. And then you're ready to get you started making your game. All right, so here's the GDX liftoff. This is new with version 1.12. So 1.11 had an older version. So I had a previous video that showed how to set that up. Give it a project name of video tutorial. And I'm going to set the package to org.everkeep.game. We'll just call it game tutorial. And we'll set a main class. We'll call it game demo. And then you click on the link, project options. So you can set the platforms that you want. So let's do all of them for right now. You can do secondary platforms. I won't go into those. Languages, so you can actually do a different programming language. So if you wanted to code in Groovy, Kotlin, or Scala, you could do that. You could select your version there. And then there are extensions. And so these are the various extensions that they have. I won't go into those at this time. You could do a template. So we'll just use the classic template. So this just creates the LibGdx logo in a main window, and that's what they recommend to start with. And so if you wanted to use one of these others, game will probably be the one that I would use more often. And then these are different templates, and they have third-party templates. Going to next. So now they have third-party libraries that you can add. So they have an extensive list here of different libraries. Most of these I am not familiar with, but if you know one that you would like to use, you can add that to it. Click on Next. This is the LibGdx version 1.12.1. That's the latest version. The Java version, now it's setting it to 8, and the reason why it's setting that to 8, I'll go back here just a moment, is because iOS, for whatever reason, doesn't work. They don't have it set up to work with a higher version of Java, which I find kind of unusual because iOS is based off of a Unix platform. So if I go back here and I remove iOS, right, I can go to 17. Set my application version to 0.1. And then we set a folder. And so I'm going to set this to my LibGdx project folders under tutorials. And then I'm going to make a new folder here. So I got a new folder, and I will select that one, put it there. Since I've selected Android, I need to set that to where your Android SDK is. Select that folder, and then generate. And now it'll build the new project. So at this point, you can just exit out. So here is the video tutorial. New project created. It creates a Gradle project with all the Gradle files, and you have the sub-projects, one for your core, one for your HTML, one for your desktop. Now it's called LWJGL 3, where it used to be called desktop, and then one for Android. And the core folder is where you do most of your coding. And then the asset folder is where you'll have your images and sound files and any type of asset for your app, your game. So I'm back on the LibGdx website just to show you for creating a project. It will walk you through all those steps that I just talked about, and they give you kind of more information about what all of these do. And also here they have importing and running it. So if you're running on a different IDE, you can just follow these instructions here on how to get those set up. That's for IntelliJ, and this one down here is for Eclipse, and that one's for NetBeans. Here's running it on Android, and here it is running an iOS application on both IntelliJ and Eclipse. And then this is for running HTML. And they also have a simple game for setting that up. And so they kind of talk about the various setups, and I'll go over that in just a moment. But I won't go over the stuff for setting up for an Android project, where you have to create a basically manifest XML file for setting that up. And then for setting it up on the HTML project, they have configurations here for using GWT, which is the Google Web Toolkit. And I won't go into those. All right, so let's start up an IDE. So I just happen to be using NetBeans. So like I said, I've used pretty much every IDE that's out there, and it's just really kind of whatever your personal preference is. And so NetBeans opens the sub-projects individually. So we can just open them all right there. Now they're there. And then that goes away when we do a build. And so the setup for Android, like I showed, it's on the website, and there is there we go, and there is a file for doing an Android application, and so basically it just runs what's in core, and so all of your main code functionality and everything for your game is going to be under core. The launchers are really just for the different environments, so we don't really need to worry about those. HTML is the same way, and so it has its own launcher, which is this guy. And so he creates a GWT application. And so I'm not going to go into those, and then this is our desktop application. So here is the desktop launcher. It has the main method, and it has a startup helper. And so this is all pre-coded stuff, so I won't go into the details of this, but this make sure that everything's set up that's needed. And then it does the create application. So it's creating a lightweight Java Gaming Library 3 application, and it's creating the game tutorial. That's this class here. And then it's getting our default configurations. Now the default configurations, I think it's set the title of the window, and so that's helpful if you ever want to change it, like if you want to add a space or something. Sets up VSync, sets up our foreground frames per second based off of the display mode. So these comments kind of explain that. and then it sets the window mode. So we're using a window, and so there is the size of that. And then there's window icons, and these are some LibGdx icons. And then this is the game tutorial, and it's just extending the application adapter. It has a create method and a render method and a dispose method. So create is what's executed first, and when the program closes, it will call the dispose method. And then the render will render the images to the screen. And so you have a screen details where you clear it. So it's all clear. You begin and you draw that. So when we run this, it will bring up a window. Here it is. And its LibGdx logo is there. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this to use the game plugin. So that's importing game. And what the game will do is allow us to use screens. So we can create a new game screen. And green screen or screens can be used to swap in and out. So if you're changing a setting in your game from one scene to another, you can just use a different screen for that. So there's a screen. We'll import all the abstract methods. And then we're going back into here. We also need to set up an orthographic camera because we're going to do 2D games only. So we need to instantiate our camera here and our create. And we'll just use that one. Then we need to set it to ortho, set that to false. And then we need to set our width. And so that's where you need kind of the size of your screen. So if you go back here, you have 640 by 480, and you need to pass that down into here, essentially. The other way to do that is to use the GDX. You can get the graphics, and you can get the height, and you can also get the width. So you can do it that way as well. Right, and then down in here, after we clear the screen, we need to take our sprite batch and we need to set the projection matrix, and which we take from the camera.combine, which will get that for us. And almost forgot that we need to go to camera.update here to get it all working. And then here we need to call super.render, and that will render the screen, so we don't need that anymore. And then we need to take our image, and we'll actually move that to our game screen. And go ahead and add that. And we need to take our sprite batch, and that needs to be added to our game screen as well. Create a constructor. And in our create, we'll take out the image. We'll go here on the show. So show is what's called first. We'll create our image there. And then in our dispose, go to our game screen. It has a dispose method. That gets disposed when the screen gets removed. And then I commented out these other methods. We're not going to use those right at the moment. And then in our render, we add back in our batch to draw the image. And then here, after we create all this, we need to create our game screen. Our sprite batch. And we set our screen. And now we'll run it. And that's still displaying the LibGdx logo. Okay, and so using the game class and extending that and using our screens, now our render method has a delta time, which is a float. It's a fraction of a second is what that comes to. Now, the next thing I'm going to hit upon is kind of this camera setting. And so if we set our camera, so right now it's 640 by 480. If we set that to 320 by, say, 240, right, half the size, and when we run, you'll find that now it zooms in and it's coming from 0, 0 as our center point. So now you only have the image is now double the size. Now conversely, if we do that and then turn this to 320 by 240, we kind of get the reverse effect. It's still that same size, but now our image is now reduced by half. So it still has that image at the normal size, except it's shrunk down to fit the size of our screen. So that's how those two settings work. So if you want your pixels to be 1 by 1 in size and not like a half size, you want to make sure that these two settings are the same. And so to kind of do that, there are a couple ways. Like you can get the GDX graphics like I showed earlier and pull it from them, or you can pass those in to your game class. Okay, and so I'm actually going to hit upon another piece. So if I set this back to 320 by 240. You can also set your camera's position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a width, which is going to be our 320, and add a height, which will be our 240. And we're going to set width here and our height here. And then we're going to add a camera position. So there is camera, there's a position attribute, and then you can set here X and Y and Z locations. So we're just going to set the X to the width and the height, the Y to the height. We'll set our Z to 0. And since we're zooming in this scenario, we're now moving it to kind of show more into the center of where the logo is. So now you see we've got the logo's now kind of more centered than it was. We're zooming from that corner. So that Y is based off of a Y0 down below. And so you want to go up how high you want to go up. Change this back to 640 by 480. And now you see the logo's down here because now we're moved up the height and the width. Okay, the next thing that we're going to work on is now kind of building a framework. So now that we have our game tutorial and we have these basic steps that we're going to use every time we create a 2D game or create our scene, basically the same kind of steps. So instead of coding that over and over again, we're going to put that into a game framework. So I'm calling this game framework GDX 2D framework. Give it version 0.1. We'll use Java 17. And we'll set our LibGdx version to 1.12.1. So the first thing we want to do is take all of these boilerplate code essentially from our game class here and create a base game class. So we'll give it some default height and width. We'll put the sprite batch in here. We have our orthographic cameras here. And you see that it extends game. And we override the create method. So that will create our new sprite batch, our orthographic camera, set our height and our width, and set our position. Just center it for now so that we can update that later. We override our dispose method, so it disposes of the dispatch. We do our render, so we set that boilerplate code here. It calls the super, and we set the resize. So if it gets resized, it'll update the auto camera automatically for us. And then we override our screen, and I'll hit on this in a future episode. The next piece we want to now do is from our game screen, take out this boilerplate code and create a base screen. So the base screen implements our screen. This class is going to be abstract. We're going to have a background color, right? So we'll set our new background color to black. It'll take the height and the width. We have our render. It does this boilerplate code to kind of get everything set up and running for our color buffering and setting our background color. It'll render our child, and that's an abstract method so that anyone that overrides this base screen, you can have a custom implementation on how it's going to render out. We have a method for setting our batch, setting our background colors, various methods for setting that. So here's one for using a float. Here's one that uses the RGB colors, 0 to 255 range. And so you can set those, and so that'll convert that to the float equivalent. Now that we have our framework set up, we need to add that to our project. So we'll go under our core project. We're going to go to the build Gradle for the project, and then we add under our dependencies, we're adding our new API. Our package is our AberKeep game framework. Our name is GDX 2D framework and a version 0.1. And we come back here into our game tutorial, and we'll make this extend our base game. So we don't need these anymore. We need the render method or the dispose method. So that's that. So the only thing that we need to do is override the create method, have it called a super, and we'll create our game screen. We'll set our screen. Now our screen, instead of implementing screen, we're going to extends base screen. We don't need that. We don't need the constructor. Override the show. We're going to override the render child, which replaces our render. Don't need our batch end and begin. And we need a constructor. And we don't need to set the batch. So we don't need to set batch in our game screen anymore. And now when we run it, we still get our image just like before. Okay, so now what we ended up with is now our game extending the base game. All we have to do is override the create method, call the super, create our game screen, set that screen, and the best game when you set the screen sets that batch. And in our game screen, we extend our base screen. We're setting a size. We'll get into that more later. The show method creates our object. And then all we have to do is override the render child. And we do a batch.draw. And we'll clean up this in a later video. And that's the basis for our game framework. All right. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and feel free to subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.